Okay, so today I want to talk about angels and demons. Um, Angels and demons are a necessary component of any um, Christian view of mental health. It's part of the Christian narrative going all the way back to the New Testament and even earlier. Jesus constantly is casting out demons in his ministry. He himself is tempted by Satan. And as Christians, we take this seriously. We take this, in a sense, literally. We don't think that these are just metaphors for like human suffering. After all, Jesus did cast a bunch of demons, or the demon legion, into a herd of pigs. So this isn't just some human construct. This is something that's objectively out there. Um, and Christianity is by no means the only religion that believes in these things. It's kind of a universal component almost of human cultures, is that they believe in some sort of supernatural beings. Um, from a Christian perspective, we know that thoughts come from within our own head, and we want to get control of those thoughts as much as possible and come to correct judgments about things and have correct emotions about things. Just because we have an emotion doesn't mean it's necessarily a correct emotion. And just because we have a thought doesn't necessarily mean it's a correct thought. We want to have accurate and correct thoughts and accurate and correct emotions. It's really easy to be, as Aristotle said, it's really easy to be angry, but to be angry in the right way, to the right degree, and for the right reasons takes a lot of work. But from a Christian perspective, it's not just natural habit building. You're also contending with creatures that are supernatural. Demons propose tempting thoughts to you. Angels propose edifying thoughts to you. And the angels and demons clash over you. You have that classic image of, the angel on your right shoulder and the demon on your left shoulder, and each one of them is kind of fighting with each other, arguing with each other, with your head caught in the middle, and you're trying to make sense of everything. Um, that's kind of a nice little picture of temptation in general, but from a Christian perspective, we take that very seriously, that that's actually happening, that it's not just a metaphor, that is actually happening. There are actual demons harassing you and actual angels harassing you. One of the best authors who discusses this is C.S. Lewis. But one of the earliest authors to discuss it is by the name of Evagrius Ponticus. Evagrius Ponticus was a Greek, and he moved down to Egypt to practice asceticism in the desert. He lived basically in a cave. And he wrote a book called the Practicus, Praktikos, which just means like the techniques or practices. And he came up with what he called the 8 logoismoi. And logoismoi is just basically Greek for passionate thoughts. And this 8 logoismoi evolved into what later became the 7 deadly sins. And what are the logoismoi are basically the same as the 7 deadly sins, except the added one is sadness. Sadness is not one of the 7 deadly sins. But what Evagrius said is that each of the logoismoi, or passionate thoughts, or deadly sins, however you want to look at it, is also linked to a certain type of demonic being. So, for instance, there are certain kinds of demons that are linked with the emotion and thought of pride, versus there's whole another set that are linked with the gluttonous thoughts, passionate thoughts about gluttony. And there's a whole other class that are linked with lust, that are linked with jealousy or with envy or with anger. And the whole point of this is basically that when you are fighting the demons, that you know that you're not just contending with your own thoughts. The demons will conspire with each other to give you a false impression of your own prowess, for instance. The demons will tempt you for a while. Evagrius says there are times when demons will tempt you, and then they'll pull away very quickly just to trick you into believing that you've overcome them. but while your guard is down, some other demon will take advantage of you. For instance, like the demon of lust, for instance, will really attack you really hard. And then you'll fight it off and try to resist the temptation. And then it'll pull away spontaneously. And you'll think, oh, I've really overcome that. But then seeing your weakness, the demon of pride will come in and take advantage of the situation and make you think that you are really awesome for overcoming the demon of lust and that you are just so special and you should be so proud. And then you can become arrogant and narrow-minded very quickly. So that part of the point here is to always be humble and always be sort of suspicious of your own abilities, suspicious of your own thoughts, that they might not be your own thoughts. They might have another origin, another source. And it's important to always recognize that if you are being plagued by thoughts that are really harassing, thoughts that just seem to keep coming and for no good reason, it might not be a pure physiological thing. It might be supernatural. Well, of course, a lot of people say, that you're crazy, and they'll just be dismissive towards it. But it is a pretty common part of human experience cross-culturally that is the case, and there's a decent amount of evidence, I would say, even from a biological perspective, that not every single event in our phenomenological experience of the world, our conscious experience of the world, is exhaustively explained by biology. Some people might say, well, that's God of the gaps and all that kind of stuff, and that you're just waiting or whatever. You're just assuming that God exists just to fill in our gaps in current knowledge. And yeah, that's a fair accusation. However, that accusation is a two-edged sword, because the alternative is really a atheism of the gaps, a science of the gaps. You either assume that there are certain things that science will never explain, or you assume that there's nothing that science can never explain, and that our current knowledge now will be supplemented and eventually exhaustively fulfilled. And I think that that actually is less reasonable than a God of the gaps sort of way of thinking, because the human mind is intrinsically limited. The human mind is intrinsically fallible. Even the smartest people make pretty big mistakes, and even the smartest groups of scientists, labs of scientists, debates between scientists still get things wrong. And every time something new is discovered, new questions arise. And I think that's just the nature of the beast here, where our minds are just finite fleshly organs, and we don't have a grasp of all things. And so I think it's less reasonable to believe that science will somehow answer all of these questions, even if given an infinite amount of time and infinite resources to answer them. I still think that there will be things that just simply are not explained, never will be explained, can't be explained. And I don't think that God is just hiding there in the shadows somewhere in the unexplained. I think God is everywhere. But I'm just saying that of those two alternatives, I think believing that there are some things that are supernatural and never will be explained through naturalistic science is more reasonable. Anyways, I think where this really becomes practical is when we think about certain mental illnesses like obsessive-compulsive disorder, and maybe even like schizophrenia. And don't want to jump to conclusions and people to think that I'm saying that anyone who's experiencing thoughts that feel like they're coming from outside, like hallucinations or hearing voices or intrusive thoughts, that automatically those are demonic thoughts. No, I don't think that. I think that there's a lot of evidence that these things can be generated by biological processes, not exhaustively understood currently, but nonetheless, I do think that there are certain times when there are thoughts that are outside of the sort of patterns we normally see with schizophrenia or anything like that. So you might be, for instance, in church, and you might not have schizophrenia or obsessive compulsive disorder diagnosed, but all of a sudden you just get really harassing thoughts, as you're sitting at church at mass or whatever, or you might be trying to pray, or you might be trying to do something good. You might be trying to like give money to the poor or help someone who's homeless or less, advantaged than you. And you might have a thought that just really plagues you. It might be like a really strong, lustful thought. You might be just like helping a cute old lady across the street, and all of a sudden, bam, you get hit by this really lust-filled thought. Or you're plagued by this really strong anger that just comes out of nowhere. And you don't know why you're angry. It just comes out of nowhere. And you just feel, where is this coming from? And unless you're circumspect and self-observant, you might not even notice that it's happening. You can try to fight those feelings off and those thoughts off, and you'll have some success. But one of the key points of the Christian tradition is that there's a very big limitation to how much human reason can contend with supernatural reason, whether that's angelic or demonic, that our minds are far, far inferior to the minds of supernatural beings. And if you are trying to fight with a demon, chances are, unless you are a very, very holy saint, you will lose, and it will be really, really bad. Someone I once knew used to say, dialogue with darkness always ends in darkness. And so if you're trying to, argue with a demon in efforts to overcome it somehow, chances are you will lose really bad. So it's best that you flee those things, unless you really are a holy saint, like, for instance, St. Anthony of the Desert. It was his ministry to fight and argue with demons. He has a very nice biography that I recommend everyone read. It's very short, very easy to read. It was written pretty much contemporaneous with him by St. Athanasius in, I think it was the 2nd or 3rd century AD. So this is ancient stuff. And that's what Anthony's life was fighting with demons and arguing with them. And that was his gift from God. That was his charism, to fight those demons. If it's not your charism, I don't recommend fighting with demons. I recommend staying close to holy things, staying close to sacraments, staying close to prayer and scripture, holy water, blessed salts, and all those things if necessary. Those are, I guess, the ordinary means of fighting with demons. But at the same time, it can be biological, and you don't want to rule that out either. So don't be obsessed with blessed salts and blessed water and think that that's going to somehow solve your problems, when sometimes it means just you need a medication, or you just need to learn how to expose yourself to your anxieties and acclimate yourself to new skills of dealing with those anxieties. Anyways, well, I hope this was helpful to some people. Leave any questions, comments, or scathing rebuttals below. This is a huge topic. I understand that I can't possibly do justice to it in a 13-minute, some second video. And I hope to be able to make more videos like this in the future. Have a good night. Bye.